All right, it's Zarak from Real Chiropractic Dynamics, and today we're going to have a chat with Vismai Schonfelder. Now, Vismai, I've seen you a lot on the Chiro Europe circuit, and you're a big part of that family. So I know who you are, but for anyone that's tuning in that doesn't know who you are, do you want to share who you are and what you're up to?
Yeah, well, my name's Vismai, and I've been a chiropractor for 20 plus years, and I had a really significant event happen in 1996. I actually collapsed on a bus in West Africa, and I woke up 10 days later in London, and I was in a coma, and I died. And that I had one of those classic near-death experiences, and that just really significantly altered the trajectory of my chiropractic career, actually. So I was really good with the link with intelligence and universal intelligence and the body, but I was really hopeless with the link with business. And that was a real struggle for us, especially because we owned a chiropractic business when we were only 28 years old. So we just had a lot to learn. So that's sort of been my path for the last few years. It's just sharing how we cracked a really cool code with our practice in Amsterdam. You know, we had a great stable office there. Luckily, it still exists.
And what we're going to chat about today is patient retention and your PVA, because you're kind of famous for your PVA.
Yeah, I mean, it was just the PVA, I guess, was the result of a lot of really hard work, you know, like actually that probably just reminds me, we might as well start on that. I mean, often people ask me, how did I do that? You know, they sort of see the trophy of this PVA above 2000, you know, just having 2, 3, 4 new people per year, and the rest of it just full and employing other chiropractors. And I think there's one question emerging, certainly in my small group of chiropractic masterminds that I'm in, but I also start to notice that globally with the different groups that I see on Facebook. And that is, how did we go from like an office that had a relatively high burn rate of new people and churn rates to an office that got its PVA above 100, moved it on to 2000, so that I could actually just work in my own natural rhythm, my own natural pace, with my own personality, even if I didn't like scripting, even if I didn't like Facebook ads, healthcare classes, and also some of those cheesy marketing tactics that we get taught that just make your stomach churn. You know, how did I actually pull that off? You know, and there's it all comes back to one thing. I mean, we bang on in chiropractic, we bang on about one cause, one cure, right? You know, if a client comes into us with shoulder pain, neck pain, we always bring it back to the nervous system. We always say, listen, that's just a symptom of an underlying problem. Now, almost all chiropractic business problems, it has the same anatomy. So I get asked, how do I increase my PVA? How do I get more new people? How do I keep an eye on my cash flow? How do I finance my life as a chiropractor? And I wish there was a magic pill that you could swallow, but you just got to do the work, right? And we were just sort of fishing around everywhere, Jyoti. You know, we really had no idea what we were doing, because after 3 years, we had no money. Actually, we worked really hard. We were building the practice, but we just didn't have any money left. And that night, we just put the kids to bed, and Jyoti was sitting at the table. And it was just I could feel her vibe of like, something's got to change here. We've got to fix this, you know. And she said to me, what are we going to do? You know, we've got all these dreams that we want to live. We've got these goals. We had a dream to take the kids traveling around the world and homeschool them. And the naive thing was, we even had a 200-year, let's say, business plan, because we wanted to leave this legacy for our community. And we were very altruistic, actually. We were wanted to serve everybody, but something had to change. You know, we got really desperate after having this meeting with our accountant, and we were just glazing at this stupid report he gave us that made zero sense at all. We just wanted to know if we had enough money in our bank to pay the taxes, you know. So, but anyway, that was the start of something that evening was the start that set Jyoti and I on this extremely intense search to get a grip on this thing called the chiropractic business. You know, I think one of the biggest myths in our profession is because you're a good chiropractor or because you've been to a great chiropractic school, that you're going to have a successful chiropractic business. But oh my God, Zarak, you can't, it's like night and day. You
It can
cannot
be the
compare
opposite
those
as
two.
well. There's chiropractors
Yeah.
that they have great businesses and maybe they're not such good adjusters. I had a conversation
Mm-hmm.
the other day with Pat McMahon, and someone had said, like, how did you conquer your relationship with money? He had a block with accepting money at one time. And the conclusion that we came to is that people often want one thing. They want, how do I get my PVA high? Well, you just do this one thing or these three things. And he's like, it's the amalgamation of 10 or 15 different things. There's not, you have to go through the process and follow the journey. Obviously, we're lucky now, the people that are graduating now, because we've people like him, people like you that can kind of show us a bit more of a roadmap to get there. Whereas you guys were just kind of having to figure it out for yourselves mostly.
Well, we took 10 years to figure it out, but I've had a really blessed life, but it certainly hasn't always been like that. You know, we've had real struggles with trying to figure all this out, to be honest. But the last 4 years, let me just back a bit. I sold my practice in 2013. And my friend Marty, he'd been working with us for 5 years, and he started asking me questions how I did stuff. And I didn't really know. He'd ask me just intimate questions about the office. And that 6 months, because I stayed on and worked for Marty, that 6 months after that, and we met every week and we just, handed the torch over. That was the start of this distilling of my work, actually, into a digestible format for everybody. And then I got invited by Mark and Lynn down in Mallorca to go and teach this seminar at their home. So the last 4 years I've been going there twice a year. And every time I go there, the material just gets more crystallized, it gets more edited, there's a lot more critical feedback on the process. So I've actually made this really cool program. It's called My Chiropractic Sweet Spot. And it's a very complete program, and it takes all the chaos out of trying to distill those 15 different moving targets. So where do you start? Do you start with finance, or do you start with practice management? Do you start with setting up your office? Do you start with adjusting skills? So my program it's got 3 phases to it. It starts with your foundations, and that's quite a 2-dimensional phase. Basically what that is about, the mindset of owning a business. You've got to change from this job mindset to an entrepreneurial mindset. You've got to change from short-term fixes to long-term visions. You've also got to have quite a counterintuitive mindset during the process, because at certain points it's important not to grow. And you've also got to get your business. Yeah, there's certain points when you start your journey. This is the counterintuitive part, where you've got to go deep with the people that you like. You've got to go really deep with your favorite clients.
Right.
And if you spread that too thin too quickly, your culture is very difficult to capture again. You can't, it keeps getting messier and messier, and no one can really angle in on your office and say, that's what they do, that's what they stand for, right? So that's phase 1 of the foundations. Phase 2 is the vertical component. That's where we go deep with everybody. That's where we do a full research on the value system of all the people that you love and who love you. So I'll go to movies, I'll go to the ballet, I'll go for dinner, I'll do anything with my favorite people during that phase to learn all about them, and just to see how our value systems align. That was another problem Jyoti and I had at the start. We had all our value systems going up, and the practice had all its value systems going down, but we had such a schizophrenic collection of clients in there, because I was just having anyone. I was just like, we need to grow this thing, blah, 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 blah. And I come quite exhausted from that, actually. I really couldn't, I'd have Mr. Smith would come in, for example, and I'd see his name in the agenda and I'd already get tired, because I knew I'd have to prove to him chiropractic. I knew I had to try and convince him that it's going to work, or I'd have to justify what I was doing. All his questions would be mechanically directed at me. He would be thinking about his body and parts, and he was often quite an authority sort of person. You know, he didn't want to walk with me on the journey. He wanted to either put me on a pedal stool or knock me down if things didn't work out. Then on the other hand, I'd have Mrs. Smith come in, right? And she was just this graceful woman who'd walk in the front. She'd be beautifully clothed in natural fabrics, natural clothing color. She'd be friendly to my staff. She'd be friendly to the other clients in the waiting room. She really loved me. She'd value my care. She'd be grateful for all her adjustments. She'd send all her friends, which they were all really like her. They shared her value system. So phase 2 is where you start to try and get a bit of traction with Mrs. Smith, and Mr. Smith, he can stay by the wayside. I'm not interested in trying to, you know, share somebody into the chiropractic way of life if they've just got a completely different belief system. Another important part of phase 2, though, which really sets the foundation for phase 3, and that's your cultural development within your office. A very sophisticated process, actually, to get the culture of a chiropractic office right. You know, when you walk into a party and you kind of feel the vibe, right?
Yeah.
Everybody does that in your office too. And it kind of feels like, you know, it feels nice, but then how does it get like this, you know? And there's a very methodical way of doing that, because actually your culture, if you ever want to have a sabbatical, your culture is what your clients and your staff lean on. They don't lean on your systems or your reputation. They really lean on the culture of the office. And then the last phase, that's where we scale. That's where we turn all those vertical relationships and we just scale. And what we mean, what I did with that was I employed other chiropractors. So we had 4 chiropractors in the office, and we developed those people. And at the start of the scaling phase, I dropped my book, which is, I always have a book actually as a practice building tool. It's been worth quite a few $1 million to me over the years. This was the one we wrote for Holland, and this was the one we wrote for Singapore. But we dropped this into our end of our vertical section of business building, and we entered our horizontal section in record style, because about 300 people came to the opening, and I left that night with like literally a carload of flowers, because the Dutchies love flowers. And I had so much social proofing from anyone that brought their friends that night. So we went from 2 to 4 chiropractors within the space of about 6 months.
Wow.
But I've done all the vertical work, you know. So the horizontal work and scaling it was really easy. That was the easy part.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you read the book Legacy it's about the All Blacks rugby team? When you were talking there about culture, it reminded me of that book, because they're saying that individual players do not make the All Blacks this legendary team, but what they've done is they've gone really deep on the team culture, and the team culture, the foundations for that have been set for 100 years, and they'll do stuff
and
like,
culture's fun. It makes the team, you know. Yeah, sorry, it makes the team. It makes the whole journey a bit juicy, actually. Yeah.
whether it's a chiropractic office or a rugby team. And then stage 3, what's that?
Stage 3, that's where we scale everything. So that's the horizontal phase. That's where the book comes into it. That's where the development of other chiropractors come into it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I did want to touch on, I'm just going to share my screen with you, Zarak. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Because you just before yesterday, when you texted me, you said, I wouldn't mind hearing something about the financial thing. I just made a few notes just to jolt my...
All right.
So this is the seminar that I do. It's called My Chiropractic Sweet Spot. So what we talk about today, there's all different components. Like Pat said, there's maybe 15 different things. You can't just say you want to get new patients. You can't just say you want to get a high PVA. You can't just say you want to manage your finance really well. This seminar is just a sequential order to work through that system like clockwork. And there's nothing left out of it, because there's been far too many minds work on it Of course, I seeded it, but through my seminars and through the handover of our business, I've just developed it into a very crystal clear development program. So like I said before we got on now, like any issue you've got going on with your office always comes back to the work, actually, to the work to develop the business. And we talk about this with our clients of like, you know, I've got a headache, and then we'll always say, well, that's just a symptom of an underlying cause, your headache. You know, we say that to our clients all day, but often we forget to look at our own businesses like that. You know, like people come to me with specific problems in their business, and 9 times out of 10, we can trace it back to foundations. You know, we certainly had very wobbly foundations at the start, that was for sure. But here's the diagram that I want to, just as a conceptual idea, because life's always going to throw stuff at you. You're always going to have ins and outs and ups and downs in your office. But if we think about foundations, if you can, in that first phase of this chiropractic sweet spot, get your foundations right, get your mindset, your finances, the business structure, and the private and business interface. We won't talk about that today, but that's part of the foundation, understanding where your private life and the business fits in together. If you can work a lot on that in those initial couple of years with your office, you'll be able to withstand those waves that happen at the top. It won't really move the foundations too much. Yes, you asked me, about what questions did you have particularly around financing your life as a chiropractor, Zarak?
Well, before we'd scheduled it, I'd contacted some people and said, right, if you were a student again and you had Vismai for an hour, what would you want to ask? And a topic that came up a lot is building up a healthy relationship with money as a chiropractor. So you graduate, you're out, and you start making some money, and you maybe haven't quite got your patient avatar yet, but you're starting to make some money. How do you use that productively and in the best way?
I think it's really good to accept the myth that just because you're a good chiropractor, you're going to do well with money. They're very different skills. But I guess the biggest one is be responsible. Like Jyoti and I, we just didn't even want to look at the numbers and look at the figures. We were just too altruistic. We wanted to serve everybody, and money was coming in, money was going out. But after 3 years, we didn't have any money left. So we had to face the responsibility, you know, of that. I think it's also important to know about frequency of money. Jyoti and I always thought about money on a monthly pattern. It's a really big trick within our profession, that because you talk about weekly stats, it structurally doesn't mix in with the frequency that your accountant or your bookkeeper works at, or your paycheck. Mostly you'll get paid per month. So if you just calculate all of your private costs, all of your business costs, if you're a business owner, and your client stats, all the stats that you get, start thinking in months. That was a really big mistake that we took a few years to correct. But once we settled into this monthly frequency of everything, it was a lot easier to get a lot more bigger picture.
What were you doing before you figured out to do it monthly? Were you just doing it on a week by week basis, or?
Yeah, well, you just check the client numbers at the end of the week, you know, and we'd see, we saw this many people this week, and we just we weren't really looking at it. We were just looking. We had a very basic thing: is there money in the bank? That was pretty as far as it went, actually. Because
there wasn't much of a system.
Those accounting meetings. No, we just didn't have any system. And those accounting things you go to, the meetings we went to, you know, I guess they were a bit intimidating for Jyoti and I. I was only 28 at the time when I started. So. Another thing, this is one thing, it does not matter how much money you make, actually. It's a very counterintuitive thing here, but what does matter is the money and your personal life. There's a real interface, and that can create a lot of friction if you don't get that organized. So we reversed engineered everything. Actually, we thought, what's our private life expenses? And we have made a sheet that you can fill in, actually, that just exhaustively covers all our expenses. And then from that, we thought, you know, the business has got to serve the primary needs of the family. And we just basically worked out then, okay, that's the financial needs. What's the wage that's got to come in? So we reverse engineered that. That helped us a hell of a lot with budgeting, and we saved a hell of a lot of money just by doing it that way. The other thing that really helps with financing is knowing your statistics. So you've got to know your average cost per adjustment, your average profit per adjustment. You've got to know your average fee paid per adjustment. You've got to understand the implications of giving away free adjustments. That has an enormous impact on your financial flow. And then you've got to do this quarterly. We did this every quarter. We measured all this stuff every quarter. And we had a little card on the back of the cupboard door down in our cellar in Holland. And we just write every quarter, we'd write these things: profit, loss, total revenue, number of people seen. So after 2 or 3 years, you get a real rhythm and you get a real feeling for what how you are tracking your finances.
And it's what gets measured gets managed. If you weren't putting that energy and that thought process into it and you're just letting it do, then you're kind of playing a lottery.
Yeah, exactly, which is what we were actually. Yeah. But getting into the PVA thing and getting back again to this business and private interface, at the start, if you look at the top part there, at the start, it's got me and the chiropractic business, and the red arrows, they're my values, right? And when I was 28, I didn't even know all my values. So I had some values clashing with people in the office. But because we went vertical in phase 2 of the developmental process, what actually happened was all my private values started to feed into my professional work. So the whole thing just lined up. It just gave me so much grace, so much ease, so little stress because we'd done the work. And that is actually the underlying factor that causes the PVA to go to 2000.
Because you're resonating with the people that are coming into the office, and you've taken that time to go deep with who do you want and who are those people that want what you're providing.
Yeah. So in phase 2, we develop with everybody what we call an analog value system, and we actually measure everybody's values actually, so we know if we're winning immediately or not. But you know, when you hop in a red car or you get your first red car and you go for a drive in the city, red cars seem to be everywhere. You know how that goes? You know, all of a sudden there's just red cars everywhere because you have
or a silver Peugeot 206 if you're from Northern Ireland.
Yes, or a Peugeot 206. The same thing happened with us actually. So we started collecting all these values, and all of a sudden everyone had those values that we would go to a party, and it was just, we just had an affinity with those people. So everything lined up for me, and that just gave me a lot of ease. And then we formed what I call this sweet spot. So I love you basically means that I see those 4 values in you, which I'll talk about in a second. You love me, so you see those values in me. And you've got money because we're running a business, so they've got to be able to afford, you know, lifetime chiropractic care. So those 3 combined form this beautiful, beautiful sweet spot. And one story I really want to share, because it actually changed my life completely. I was eavesdropping at over a conversation at the bar actually at Cara Europe, and Dr. Guy Rickman was there, and he said, there's 4 discussions. All the people that come into your office, they have 4 discussions. He says they're either going to be they're either going to be vitalists, they're going to be naturalists, they're going to be holists, and they're going to be humanists, or they're going to be mechanists, artificialists, reductionists, or authoritarian. He really separated those 4. And I just ran up to my room that night with all my little yellow Post-it notes. And I was like a crazy professor in the room, right? I think that was maybe 2006, 2005, I can't remember now. But I spent the whole night thinking of all my favorite clients in relationship to those discussions. And for the next 10 years, I just developed all that, you know. So now I can really share with people exactly how you fill your office with people who love you and who you love, you know, and who can afford it. So that's why, you know, that's why I could just do that thing with such grace and ease. It seemed like at the end, you know, but it, you know, if you go to a ballet concert, or if you go and watch a beautiful pianist play their art, they've also done all the scales. You know, you don't see that at the concert, but when they were 5 or 6 years old, they were just working away at their scales, you know, their rudimentary things. And that's what my whole sweet spot seminar is about, is just going through the scales first before you even jump into scripting and trying to grow out of control and rushing into employment opportunities that might not fit with you, or taking holidays when the business is not ready for it, you know. And then it's just a lot of work you have to do to get from point A to point B.
And that might help people as well. Like we're looking at this from a high volume, vitalistic standpoint, but not everybody wants to be high volume. They maybe don't want to see a lot of people, and they're quite happy seeing one person for 45 minutes and doing all kinds of functional neurology tests and basically just being there for back pain or intense migraines. And for them, it might actually
Mm-hmm.
still help to sit and go through and, okay, who is my ideal client?
Yeah, like that's a great point, because this is not about telling somebody how to think. It's quite the opposite, actually. It's it's just resonating with people who think like you. It's not like judging somebody who wants to be something else. Like, and also with the clientele, like, I'm not judging Mr. Smith in a bad way, but I felt like a little boy walking around with my butterfly net and just gently bringing in people who I really liked, you know. And that's a lot easier, at least what I found. I was banging my head against the wall. You know, I was losing sleep, man. I was having sweaty, anxious sleeps and worrying what I'd said to Mr. Smith, and how could I, oh, you know, and phone him up the next day and say, oh, I hope he didn't take it the wrong way, and kind of tiptoeing around him, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was not really that just wasn't what I had in mind, actually, for my career. I really questioned it, actually. I was like, gosh, we're 3 years in. I've been working pretty full on the business. We've got no money left, and I've got a heap of Mr. Smiths running around. I'm like, oh God, this is going to be a long process, this one. So we got quite desperate after that meeting. When I come home from the tax thing, we just got quite desperate. Yeah.
Do you think whenever you get out and you start seeing people, is it better during the first, let's say it's the first 6 months in practice, are you better sitting and getting clear then on who your avatar is? Or let's say you want to see a high volume of people, are you better just getting everyone in, and then after 6 months you sit and evaluate, like, okay, who stayed, who do I like hanging out with, who do I like spending time with in the practice, who do I maybe not like as much them coming in? Or would you just get clear of it right from the word go?
That's a great question. So I told you before how one of the mindsets is counterintuitive thinking. The reality is, if you've opened your business, you've got to have cash flow. You've got to be paying the bills. So at the start, you don't have a choice. You have to take everybody. Not that I ever said no to anybody, by the way, just to make it clear. So you get your practice up and running, but what you've got to do is get to a point where you've covered all your private costs and you've covered all your business costs, and just poise the growth then. I'm doing that right now. My practice is only 4 weeks old here in Singapore.
Right.
And we went from 0 to 62 people in 4 weeks. And I'm cool with that, because that just works for me. So interesting, we've had lockdown now. So I've been really able to explore those people. You know, I don't have that many clients, and I have learned about people this lockdown really nicely. But if I was seeing 500 a week, I just wouldn't have even started with that. So I'm poising my growth now to go into this vertical phase. I don't want things to explode too quickly, because actually a friend of mine was leaving Singapore not long ago, and he said, oh, would you like to buy my client base from me? He offered it for an extremely cheap price, and I just didn't take it because I didn't want to mix the cultures. It takes a hell of a lot to attract similar value systems from people. And you have to almost protect those people from the ones who are not sharing the values. This is a counterintuitive part again too. So if you start having all the people you like to have in the office and they're coming in and they're seeing other people who they have an affinity with, that breeds on itself.
Yeah,
But
they
if they
want to
come
be
in
there
and
now.
it's like, it's like going to a party with a bunch of weirdos, it's like you don't want to be there, right?
Right.
So I didn't do that, even though it was a great opportunity on paper, but I just don't want to do that because I know what it means to disturb the value system. But I've got the cash flow already because we're up to 62 people. And so you've got to do that at the start. You've got to get things up so that's covering your costs. But then, and then when you're ready, then you can go vertical with everybody.
Yeah, that's something I've never heard of that, because I've got this growth mentality. So I think I would just go in to practice like a bull in a china shop and just work and work and work and work and get a high volume of people and hope that some of them stay. But the concept of actually taking a break and going vertical, i.e. going deep and laying the foundation and getting really clear on what your values are and what the values are of the people you're looking after. It's something, I think, it sounds counterintuitive at the time, but it's going to make it so much more efficient on a macro level.
Well, that's it, Zarak. Like that, and so that's this one cause, one cure thing again, right? My PVA was just a natural outcome from the work. I'm not special. I don't have any special charisma. I'm not particularly talented in anything.
Give us
It's
the
just like,
special script.
yeah, exactly. I don't have that magic pill, but so many people say to me, gosh, Vismai, if only I could get more people to stay in care, my practice would be a lot more graceful. It would be a lot easier, So they come to me with the PVA question, but not that many people just want to go back to the basics and back to the foundations and back to the rudiments, because they're kind of redundant things. Like if I get a chiropractor that's been out for 20 years and they come into my program and I sit down with them and the very first thing we talk about is mindset, it's kind of like, it seems all too easy, they just want to know the PVA formula, but there isn't one. There's not a formula.
Yeah.
It's a process that you've got to go back to and keep revisiting. And there's no shortcuts. You can't do a shortcut, So my work is not something that people particularly want. It's more like what people really need. But everyone wants to do what they want, I've got this problem. I've got a new patient problem. Let's try and fix that leaky bucket. Let's try and fill that bucket, but they're not thinking about the leaks in the bucket, where I just went the opposite. I just let's fill it with people that love me, that I love them, and they've got money. That's the sweet spot,
Yeah, I've heard you speak a few times. So I've heard you speak at Chiro Europe, and you jumped on the call last week whenever we were having online classes. And you kind of remind me. Have you read the book, the 4-Hour Work Week?
Yes.
So it's about building that efficiency. Like, I kind of think you're the Tim Ferriss of chiropractic, because what you've done, it's super efficient and it can build very fast. But in order to do that, you have to really sit down and put the thought into it. And that's basically what the whole 4-Hour Work Week is about. There's no point if I'm earning 200 grand a year and you're earning 200 grand a year, but you're just living this expensive lifestyle and you're barely even able to pay your rent at the end of the month, versus if I'm making the same amount of money but living within my means, doing what makes me happy, and maybe I have 2 small properties that are paying the rent on my small apartment, and then I'm basically living for free. It's so much more efficient. But this is kind of like the chiropractic
it
alternative.
really is. It really is. Listen, I've got friends that have been earning $15 million a year from chiropractic, and they've got no money. It's really hard to believe, but they've got no money. And during this COVID crisis, I've had young couples that have came to my seminar 3 years ago and got onto their savings plan, which we set up during that weekend. We set up a very structured, flowing plan with new accounts. And they did that for 3 years, and they just had a baby during lockdown, and they don't care less. They've got zero stress. And then I've got other people who've been in practice 20 years and they're just completely stressed out of their brains because they didn't get the foundations right. And I'm not finger pointing. It doesn't you know, we're all in the same boat. I mean, Jyoti and I just discovered it a little earlier out of pure desperation, but we could have also been those chiropractors 20 years later,
Yeah.
you know, because our wheels were also spinning. And the more money you make, if you don't have like you said before, what did you say about measuring? If you measure it, you
what
manage
gets
it or
measured
something.
gets
Yeah.
managed. Yeah.
Yeah, what gets measured gets managed. So if you don't measure it and you don't manage it, all of a sudden 20 years goes by, man, you got no retirement savings and no management.
I have this dilemma because on one hand, I see the value in making this patient archetype and doing it very efficiently so that you're going into practice and you're energized, and maybe you're not seeing as high a volume of people, although sure, you can still see high volume, but you're much calmer and you've got more time, like, to spend time with family, go on holidays. Like, you guys have been so efficient and you've so much freedom now. But then there's another part of my personality where I hear about these guys that see 1,000 a week, and there's a part of my personality where I get excited about that. But for me anyway, from my perspective as a student, there's no real halfway. You kind of have to make that decision. Like, am I going to go down this route where, yes, you can go on holidays, you can go to the weddings, you're going to have more time, more quality time with the family, or do we just go hardcore and fill up the clinic and you're in there sweating all the time and you're going to get to that 1,000 a week?
Well, you're going to sweat anyway, even if you're low volume. It's a big transition to make, actually. Like, and I think it's a lot about your own rhythm, you know, like if you've got the energy and the go, you know, to go and do that, but then you're really in the top 1% of chiropractors around the world, probably the top 0.05% actually of chiropractors seeing 1,000 people a week. But
that's the dilemma, because part of me wants to be like, okay, I'm going to have a family, I'm going to have kids, I want to, like, be there for them. But then the other part of my personality is like, I really would like to just see, like, can I get to 1,000 a week? Because if you're going to go to 1,000 a week, like, that is your job, that's your full-time life passion, is getting to that 1,000 a week and then maintaining
I'm sure, but chiropractic remains your life anyway. Like, you know, I've had 8 years of holidays in the last 20 years, and I'm still getting adjusted all the time, and getting, my wife's a chiropractor too. We love our chiropractic, but I think because of my near-death experience, I think I just started to view my chiropractic office as a bit more of a means to an end than the end in itself. And I'm loving being back working now. I had a 5-year break just now and just started up again, and I'm loving to be back in the work. But, you know, after 13 years in my practice, I was really sick of it. I still loved chiropractic and I still loved the lifestyle, but I just got sick of it. I don't know, I got a bit bored from it. I got a bit tired from the relentless whatever that goes on, you know. But and of course we'd come back from a 12-month sabbatical, and we had a different mind shift, you know. We were just operating in a different function, you know. We had different aged children, so I took that 5 years off because Finn and Darley were just at a perfect age to hang out together and travel around the world together. The other thing about doing this work is that the sale price of your practice is, you get a really worthy sale price, because us going away for that 12 months proved to everybody that it wasn't a job that I was selling. It was actually a business that was for sale. It wasn't a job, it was a business. And I was just a cog in the wheel, but I wasn't the major cog, you know. I always say to people with the chiropractic, if you're the major cog in the wheel, you're also the major clog in the wheel, you know. And it depends what your goals are. My goal was to get out and go and travel the world with the kids, you know. That was our primary life dream. But if you want to stay and work, see 1,000 people a week, I just urge you to do that, working in a system. So systematize it. It doesn't matter if you're seeing 100 or 1,000. Work a part of the system. Just, there's a whole structure. I think I've got it here actually. This is it. So the system here, this is this red line I call the noisy or the quiet line, and it depends on what side you're living on really. But you've got the owners up here. And the owners, they've got their primary life goals and their dreams. And seeing 1,000 people a week might be that for you too. That can easily fit in there, you know, if that's your dream. That's a part of my seminar, is to just get the goals really clear. And then under that line, we've got a chief operating officer. Then we've got the marketing arm, the service and production manager, and the finance. And the chiropractic service is just this one little part here out of this whole structure. This is the only little part. So if you want to see 1,000 a week, you just got to really, really systematize that part and make yourself fully replaceable in that part. You can also get ill, you know. So even if you don't want to have holidays, things happen.
Yeah, it's
or like we did. We went through quite a marriage crisis actually in 2011 it was. And I think that if I hadn't worked on our business so well, that would have been really a lot tougher on our marriage, you know. So we were able to go off and have a really, really good break together, you know, and just pull our marriage back together actually. So there's just a lot on the line for doing the work. It's not just about the successful numbers or serving people. There's your whole private life and your business life has a really big interface. And so doing the work's just got many rewards, you know. Yeah.
And that's attractive as well, like having that freedom, so that if you are having marriage problems, you can actually put your focus and attention on that. You're not a slave to the clinic. Whereas the idea of or the practice rather, but the idea of seeing 1,000 people a week, you kind of are going to be a bit more of a slave. There's plenty of chiropractors that have seen that kind of high volume that don't have great family relationships. And I think it's whenever I graduate, I realize it's rich now talking about it as a student, but the thought process I have behind it now is whenever I graduate, I'm going to work for 1 year as an associate and just get some experience. And then after that year, I need to sit down and go through my values and make that decision, be like, okay, do I want to build a practice where I'm going to see less people, but I'm going to have all of that freedom for a family life? Or is it in tune with my values that I'm going to go down this route? And maybe I never see 1,000 a week, but it's the pursuit of it. And I want to become the kind of chiropractor that can see 1,000 people a week and just decide, you know, what would your thoughts be on that?
Well, I'm pretty low key actually. Like I just don't have that. I didn't have that dream actually. I actually saw a lot less people than what everybody would imagine. You know, I only ever saw like 120 to 150 people a week. That was always what I did. I always saw the least amount of people from the chiropractors in our office because I lunched with them one-on-one every week. I really developed my CA team. So I put a lot of energy on the business, not in the business. So there's different phases from your career, I guess. When you first come out and if you're working for somebody else, you don't need to have all these caps on because you're just this part of it all. So you can just really focus on that, you know, when you get out, developing your skills with adjusting, developing your communication skills. But if you ever own your own practice, all of a sudden it's like a fish going from a fishbowl into an ocean. Yeah. And if you don't work through those 3 phases in a sequential order, it can really go a bit pear-shaped actually.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think a lot of people are going to get value from that, and it would maybe encourage people to just take a couple of moments and think about what kind of people do they want to work with. I've said before, like, what kind of chiropractor am I? What kind of practice do I want to have? And you then specifically go out and find the people that are looking for that type of practice and that type of chiropractor. And then going deep with the money, looking at your finances, looking at what actually do you need and not need, and building the practice around that, as opposed to what a lot of people do. A lot of young guys, they come out of chiropractic college and they get some money, and maybe they've never had money, maybe they never had disposable income, maybe they had a couple of little jobs through school. But whenever the first couple of bonos, that money comes through, all of a sudden they think they're rich, and that the tax man's not going to need paid at the end of the year. And maybe
give everybody one little tip on that point, because my dad was a postman, right? My dad, he wasn't a rich man, he was a postman, but he retired very early. And he said to me, because I always asked Dad, I said, how in the hell did you manage to retire at 55, with us 3 kids running around the home? He said to me, with your first paycheck, make sure you put some for your retirement fund. And I did. So in Australia, where I was working at the time, you had to put some, but you could also add some. So you've got to start retiring. You've got to start your retirement plan with your first paycheck. And that's part of the foundation of this process too, is paying yourself first. And a big part of paying yourself first is a lot of delayed gratification. Because if you allow time to work into the whole process, it's a beautiful thing. Time does a very beautiful thing with money on very small amounts, but very consistent. If you can do that as young as possible, then retirement will be a lot easier.
What percentage, Vismai?
That varied for us, but I'm going to tell you, we had a few different accounts just on this principle of saving. We had an account for Finn and Dali. I've got 2 children, and we saved, mate, just 100 euros a month, which was about 3 euros a day, you know, just a cup of coffee a day for our children's study costs from the day they were born until they were 18. And Dali's one came, you know, matured last year. And there was 22,000 euros on that, just from 3 euros a day. And
Wow.
we set it and forget it. We didn't look at it or touch it. We certainly didn't miss 3 euros a day from the bank, you know. So we did the same for Finn. That's not matured yet. We also saved 10 euros a day in a different account for our sabbatical. And we did that for 8.5 years. And the retirement, I've sort of done that quite, I don't want to get too complicated here, but what I do is I do a fund for 5 years. Like I've just started working now. The very first paycheck I took, I started a new fund here for my retirement. And because I'm 47 now, so things are getting closer. So I pay, the numbers don't matter. But at other times we bought the practice building where I was working in. We bought that building, but when we sold the business, we kept the real estate.
Wow.
So that was in 2003. So now we get a monthly rent from that, which really covers a huge part of our living costs, you know. But if you don't do all that and you don't get those accounts separated, do them with your first paycheck. Set up the accounts. You can go onto mychiropracticsweetspot.com and there'll be some forms to download how you can actually do it. And even if you put aside $1 a month right now, the number doesn't matter, because you'll go through different phases of life, but you've just got these accounts there that you can start injecting them again. But you never let them go to zero. You know, you never let them go to $0 per month. You've always got to keep pushing there. And then all of a sudden your work starts, and then you get back and you restructure it again. But we've been using the same structure since going to the DeMartini Financial Mastery Program. We flew off to Houston because we had no idea of money. And we went from zero responsibility of money to 8 days of 15 hours a day working on money. So it was a very extreme difference, but it was a great foundation to get things going.
Yeah, and it's being disciplined with your money. I saw a clip of Tony Robbins talking, and he'd heard about this guy, and it's some guy in America, and he worked in Walmart, or he was a waiter or something. He wasn't making much money. He was able to pay his rent, and then he had a bit for food and that at the end of the month. And he had a friend who was into investments, and the guy said, "Look, I'm going to make you rich, and you're going to retire. You're going to give me 20% of your paycheck every month." And the guy's like, "Dude, I work in Walmart. I can't do that. I need that 20%. His friend says, "Look, if the government said that they were adding 20% onto the tax that you already pay, you would grumble, you would whine, you would cry, you would complain, you'd get angry. But at the end of the day, you would pay it. And you would pay it because if you don't pay it, you're going to go to the jail. Treat this the same way and you're going to be rich." He retired at 70 with something like 70 million. He gave 35 million of it away before he died. From
That's what
putting
time
away
does.
that 20% that compounded over time, you know?
Yeah. But you got to, I really like the process of setting it and forgetting about it. Just set it and forget it. So with Finn and Dali's study costs, we just went into a bank and we said, "Do you have any study savings plans?" "Yep, I got this one." And every January 1st, every year, we got a report, but the savings plan was automatically indexed. which meant the money kept going up with inflation. So what started out as 100 euros a month, after 15 years, it was about 116 euros a month. But we didn't add 6 euros each time. It's just January 1, the whole fund got indexed. That's how we just kept keeping the 100 euros up to date with whatever the value of money was doing. But we set it and forget it. We didn't even, I read that report for 2 seconds once a year, that was it. Yeah. But then it matured, and Dali was heading off to New York, and we had, 22,000 euros there to start her study life just from a cup of coffee a day.
And obviously, like, we can't go too deep into the intricacies of it, but would you recommend, you're saying like set it and forget it. Would you also recommend maybe hiring a CFA at a certain point and seeing if you can get into investments, or do you think just save it and leave it there?
Well, that's beyond my scope. I really don't have any credentials for that. I'm just a chiropractor like any other person, just trying to make it work. So I really don't know. I mean, that's such a private thing to get into with what you invest in. We've made some real bloopers, man, over the years with wrong investments. We've lost a lot of money to different things, But eventually it comes back to how my dad did it, or how the Walmart guy did it. Just consistent, small amounts, consistent into a fund that's growing at a certain rate. You don't have to be a rate chaser. Everyone says, oh, you're only getting 2%, or, just, if you keep it with your own responsibility and you build your practice and that gets busier, you can actually add more to it from this end, rather than looking for a rate that's 2% higher. And I'm sure that makes a big difference over time. Of course it does. But if that's going to stop you from even starting, you're the loser, So just add a bit more to the fund yourself on your side of the equation.
Yeah, people bicker and argue about over the small, tiny details, and then they're not putting any time and energy into the big things like setting the habit of putting 10, 20, 30% of your money away each month. That would be a big thing that you should maybe put some energy into. But whether you're getting 2.5 or 3% on this account, it's a small thing to put that energy into.
It is, especially if it stops you from taking action. Yeah. The thing is, just with this money thing, I think just consistency, slow and steady wins the race, And if you have a bit of luck in between, that you win a few on the races, or your real estate goes up in value that you bought, or your investment fund that you go at a higher risk. If you're a young person, you can manage a lot more risk than if you're getting closer to retirement age. Also, when you're young and you don't have children, you can save a hell of a lot more of your percentage of your money than when you do have a family. So there's all different phases, there's all different sections through that whole financial pursuit, but it's just good if you've got a slow and steady part of your strategy that has to be there.
All right. Perfect. Vismai, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Can you shout out again the email or the website for people to get in touch with you?
It's just this one here, mychiropracticsweetspot.com.
Perfect. I'm going to do 1 year of associateship and get some money together, and then I'm going to come to your seminar.
Oh, please come along. It's a great community developing, actually. Yeah, it's really, the community itself's got a very nice platform where we learn a lot from each other, actually. Always easier to go at that. I always say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And this whole sweet spot concept is really a group of people really helping one another. It's lovely, actually.
All right. Guys, go check it out. mychiropracticsweetspot.com. Thank you again, Vismai.
My pleasure.